All right, so let's address just this area. Okay, so how do we draw an eye? Number one, this goes back to understanding what an eye is. An eye is a ball that sits inside of a socket. So how do we know what the socket is? Well, you take your cues from the angles in the face. So the eyebrow is making an upward angle, okay, like this. So here it is, and then it has a little corner, and it goes straight down, keeps going down, and then I can see here sort of a little bit of a darker area, and then a little dark area here. So this would be the bottom. The socket might sit actually like this. So, yeah, a little bit of it is guesswork. But now let's figure out where the eye sits. So the eye is approximately this big. That's about how big the eye is. Let me draw that a little darker so you can see. That's the approximate size of the eye. Okay, so there's a lot more eye than you think. This is just about what we get to see. Let's give it a little dimension. Now let's make this socket a little darker. Okay, so you don't have to know this anatomy stuff. I'm just trying to explain something here. What you have is a ball inside of a socket. Okay? And what you look at, what you actually are seeing, let me erase this line so it's not confusing. What most people see, or I should say what most people don't see is this. But what you're actually seeing is something where this, you can't see the whole eye, the whole iris, and you're seeing about this much. And then you're seeing this angle downward, okay? And some of these lines that you see has to do with the eyelash. And then this is wrapping around, if you think of something, it's wrapping around the eye, okay? Now this line here, conveniently, is where the eye, the sphere of the eye is moving back, and then it's being intercepted by a tiny muscle, and this is now the beginning of where bone and socket meet, and it intercepts approximately like this, okay? So the combination of those two things is what creates this lid. So I'm just adding a little shading for emphasis to hide the back of the eye a bit. Again, so you see this much at the bottom. Now, it doesn't have to work as hard to wrap around the eye because of where the socket is. But you do see more of this, okay? So same thing as the sphere of the eye moves away from the front of the face, and then you have muscle here, and then bone, muscle and bone. So then you get this. And sort of fill that in with shading. So now let's go back to this eye and sort of, this is sort of eye anatomy, eye 101. But I'm also interested in the effect that the eye is making. So part of this is shading. I kind of ruined my print a little bit. Drew too dark, but that's okay. You'll get the idea. Okay, so this is what you'd think in your mind, but you don't see all this stuff as clearly, and you certainly don't see it as clearly in a photograph or a print. All you really see are effects of light and dark. So in the beginning, when I draw sort of more realistic, I tend to keep all my shadows the same darkness. So this is as dark as this, and the lights are about the same. This helps me. If you jump too dark, right, then it'll look more like this. This is where you're sort of expressing some clarity, and you're not necessarily interested in the effects of light and shadow. When you're interested in the effects of light and shadow, you're trying not to draw lines, hard lines. So any hard lines should be done with care and realizing that you're just matching how light or how dark something is, and you're trying not to draw a line like, that. And if you do, that should be considered an accent mark. That might be where two forms meet. So I'm paying attention to this angle, down more, and then a little slight flare at the end. Slight angle here. Darker spots. I'm going to leave this fairly light because that's pretty light. And it's just barely darker in some of those areas. So this is kind of a more broken approach to drawing. But I start, like you saw in the last drawing, I do a lot of this with lines because it helps in terms of teaching to see the clarity, and it's not that far of a jump to go from that last kind of drawing to doing something like this, in case you're curious of how to approach something that is a little bit more about effects of light and dark, and people really like that because it's more realistic, and It's fine. It's, you know, you can kind of choose whatever it is that you gravitate toward. Doing this is a little bit harder, requires a little bit more thought process and experience. This is more approachable, and there's nothing wrong with your drawing looking more like a drawing and less like a photograph, because you know it's sort of up to you what kind of style comes out naturally, and what kind of information you're after. All right, let's shade a little bit more down at the bottom, cover up a little bit more of the white. So if you notice, I did not draw the lines at the bottom, and that's because I can't see them here, okay? So if you're given the task of trying to match something photographically, then you would draw what you see, not necessarily what you think. And usually people draw what they think, which is this. This is an idea of an eye. Notice that most of the dark is up here at the top of the eye, is because that's where the shadow is cast. And that's where the eye is wrapping. So most of the shadows should gather on this side and on this side of the eye. All right. Hope you found that helpful.